Facepalm America, I'm Beowulf Rockland at Facepalm USA on Twitter. Welcome. Unfortunately, there is no good news as of this recording from Ukraine. Many civilians being attacked, killed, bombed, lives being ruined, families being torn asunder. And yet, according to QAnon, Vladimir Putin is right. That's right. QAnon is one of the supporters of Vladimir Putin. And QAnon followers are being led into believing that Vlad is the good guy. And in some cases, that there's not even a war going on at all. Most people view Putin as an aggressive and unpredictable leader. But QAnon followers, not so much. You might remember QAnon, the nut jobs who believe, it's there's a big child sex ring, and they're all Democrats, and they're Satan worshipers, and Trump is going to get them all. There's an anonymous person named Q, who is a top secret government agent who's leaking secrets from the deep state. And some believe from QAnon that the invasion of Ukraine is a movie. Others think it's a false flag operation to make Russia look bad. And some say it's Joe Biden's fault. Honestly, that's just a widespread GOP belief. But it really is very difficult to distinguish QAnon beliefs from widespread GOP beliefs. In 2017, one user on 4chan, the site that hosts QAnon, wrote, Russia has historically been the perceived arch-rival and pure nemesis of the United States for 70 years. On the other hand, Putin rejects the New World Order, the global government plan of the cabal, and promotes national sovereignty. Putin has also supported the revival of Christian faith within Russia and frequently emphasizes its importance for a moral and sustainable society. They love him. QAnon thinks Putin's a great guy. Now Putin, QAnon, I guess it's been forced underground to a large degree, especially since January 6th. But they're still around, and they're still making their views known. According to John Sable, also known as QAnon John, who wrote on Telegram, one of them our social media platforms, Putin is straight gangsta. They're also hopelessly unhip. MSM, mainstream media, is totally losing their minds right now. Well, yeah, as thousands are being killed. Some believe the invasion is a false flag operation, or not real at all. QAnon believers are known for thinking that nothing is as it is, or seems. So it's hardly surprising that many instantly believe the attacks are being made up. They falsely claimed that a famous image of a Ukrainian woman with a bloodied face was taken in 2018. Others have long believed that Joe Biden is a fake president and is simply playing the role for a film. Do you remember when you were a kid? Maybe this was just me. I've talked to other people who did this too. But when I was a kid, I went through a period where I was thinking, everything that I'm going through is kind of being filmed for a TV show or a movie. It's kind of the underlying psychological premise of The Truman Show, if you ever saw that movie with Jim Carrey. Everything, the idea that everything you're doing is on camera for a TV show, for a movie, that it's being filmed and being controlled by somebody else. And the problem with QAnon, the problem with these conspiracy theorists, is that they haven't grown out of that phase. That's their problem. They're stuck in an early childhood phase, and they just haven't gotten out of it yet. That's what I think the bottom line is, at any rate. But, we're going to be talking to someone, Kelly Weill. She's a journalist at the Daily Beast. She might agree with me, but it's a more complicated background to this kind of conspiratorial thinking. And that includes QAnon, but it also includes flat earthers, kind of the ultimate granddaddy of all conspiracy theories, that the earth is flat, that it's surrounded by icy mountains, and don't sail too close to the edge, otherwise you'll fall off, and that there might be a dome over everything. Her book is Off the Edge, Flat Earthers, Conspiracy Culture, and Why People Will Believe Anything. And it provides, I think, some excellent insight into the kind of phenomenon that we're seeing with QAnon and people willing to justify mass murder in the case of Vladimir Putin. And they wouldn't stop there. We'll be back in a moment with Kelly Weill after these messages. I want to welcome to the show today Kelly Weill. She's a journalist at the Daily Beast, and there she covers extremism, disinformation, and that's going to be kind of our topic today, and the internet. She is a leading media voice on the role of online conspiracy theories in current affairs, flat earth, and other fringe ideas. Her book, in fact, is Off the Edge, Flat Earthers, Conspiracy Culture, and Why People Will Believe Anything. It's out now. Kelly, welcome to the program. Thank you for being here again.
Thanks for having me.
So when I started in talk radio, and that's something that I did before a podcast and still do occasionally, it was in the late 1990s. There were certainly a lot of fringy conspiracy theories out there, but it has transmogrified over the last 10 or 15 years, especially with the rise of social media. There seems to have been an explosion many times beyond the scale of what existed in that little analog radio world. What has transformed about the world of conspiracy theorists and flat earthers in the last few years?
Well, I think the access to these fringe theories has definitely expanded. You mentioned the rise of the internet, and we can really closely pinpoint this explosion in flat earth thinking to around 2014. And that's when people started noticing an overperformance of flat earth videos on YouTube. We can attribute this to the way that social media algorithms promote conspiracy content, which performs very well. In social media ecosystems, the things that we tend to click on are the things that are sensational, the things that provoke big emotional responses for us. So conspiracy theories like Flat Earth became really high performers, and that has continued, I think, through this day.
So what is it about that psychology that really attracts people? And this is certainly something that really predates the digital age. It predates the 20th century. What is it that is attractive to our human brains about ideas like the Earth is flat? There was an elaborate conspiracy to kill JFK. That President Trump was going to, arrest all the Democrats because they were satanic, cannibal, child murderers or something like that. What is it that attracts the mind to that, and how far back does this go?
Well, to a degree, we are all susceptible to conspiratorial thinking. And this happens because we go looking for patterns and meaning when we feel like we don't have enough information. If there's a gap in the available information, or if the information isn't comforting to us, if it doesn't uphold our priors, then often we'll go looking for alternative explanations. So in that way, conspiracy theories can be a comfort to people who are looking for a different explanation of why the world is working this way. And I think, to your point, there is also something very alluring about the weirdness of them. You know, we're curious people, and when we hear something that sounds so out there, like flat Earth, I think there's a very natural impulse to explore it.
Right. It seems, too, that we should take a step back as people living in the 21st century, because flat earthers, from the perspective of someone in, especially, 500 years ago, or even much more recently than that, sort of at least intuitively makes sense, because when you look at the Earth and you don't have any other information and you don't have access to science or information about that, it seems to be flat, and you're going to make up things like people did in ancient times about the sun being carried in a chariot across the sky, and that in a way is just kind of a continuation of myth making in order to try and understand the world around you. Now, at a certain point, you would presume that people having access to scientific information and enough kind of at least background data, not all of us or even most of us are scientists or have the ability to understand complex calculations that were initially done by the folks who discovered these things, but it's become to be widely accepted, and yet still this persists even though you have in the background. Like tell us about the evolution of the flat Earth mythos in particular, because at least there seems to be some intuitive basis, and I guess for all of these there's sort of some gut level thing that seems to be or seems like it might be true about these. If that weren't there, they wouldn't have any cachet whatsoever, would they?
No, I think that is true. There's often a grain of truth or a grain of believable truth to conspiracy theories. One funny thing is that there's this myth that until quite recently we did believe Earth was flat, and that's not actually true. We started figuring this out about 2,000 years ago because early mathematicians could make educated guesses based on shadows and the way the sun moved. But this theory has persisted not because it's the most believable, not because it's the most credible based on the information people have, which we have moved further and further into an information age where people can believe things beyond just the scale of their own eyes, which does look like a flat Earth. They don't believe it because it's the most credible theory, but because it offers something emotionally satisfying to them. And when this theory started making a comeback in around, the 1840s, people did widely believe that Earth was round. It was as absurd a theory in 1840 as it is today. But what I think was fascinating about the rise of flat Earth theory in that moment was it came during the popularization of certain natural science fields. Ideas like evolution were becoming popular and starting to put religion in the back seat and science in the front seat. So when offered this alternate theory of the world that let people take a comforting mental step, in this case, dismissing science and saying that all of science could be ridiculed and just tossed in the garbage, these theories gave people emotional sustenance. And so I think even though, then as in now, we have the evidence to quite easily disprove flat Earth, it's never been fully about the evidence as much as it is about people's willingness to believe something.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I mean, you can explain all the established science you want to a flat earther, and it doesn't really make a difference any more than a QAnon believer, would respond to, political or historical facts.
That's absolutely true. It's very funny because I often find that flat earthers aren't making a full argument. They're not proposing a full theory. Instead, what they're doing is trying to poke holes in the globe theory, not theory. Globe is a reality.
Right.
But there are some very famous flat earth videos that will propose 100 or 200 questions you should be asking about the globe Earth. And all of those have very reasonable answers. You can answer each of them. But if you do it in person, someone will say, okay, but what about the next one? And chances are you don't know certain stats about Earth's circumference offhand. So it comes off as though there's a reasonable debate to be had, even though there isn't.
It really seems to me that in a deep way, the algorithm of YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or what have you has tapped into the human psyche better than the sciences have, because they understand at least, or respond well to what comforts people. And I'm wondering whether you think it's possible or not for the forces of science and rationality to understand how that internal human system works and present information in a way that impacts those same centers in the brain. How do we go about transforming this? Because it seems clear that argument is not the way.
It's such a difficult proposition. You're talking to someone who spaced out during science classes but loves to read science fiction.
Right.
I think that YouTube understands it is a business after all. Its prime motivation is making money, and these social media companies understand that what sells is not necessarily what is factual, but what is sensational often. And so it's difficult, I think, for the sciences, which might be, a bit more academic in nature, maybe a little drier, or maybe just not so interesting, because to make a video asserting that the Earth is a globe is, it's old news. No one's clicking on it because it's not new and outlandish. I did hear an interesting theory recently from a scholar of disinformation who said that rather than try and debate against all these various conspiracy theories, which many of them are so outlandish they don't intellectually merit debate, that science should be flooding the zone with their information. And they should understand that at a certain point, volume is important. There are right now 1 million conspiracy channels and conspiracy talk show hosts and internet personalities, and that's not necessarily true of the sciences. So it is possible that maybe in engaging with people on maybe a more personal level or at a level outside the ivory tower, that maybe you can establish those connections in an emotional way like conspiracy theorists have managed to.
Yeah. I guess we almost need another generation of Bill Nyes or Mr. Wizards. I mean, even those examples, even for their own time, seem a little, cranky and uncool. But we need something that taps into a basic human interest, and we do have it. At the root of this same conspiracy theory motivation really is a curiosity about the universe, and that can also be satisfied by genuine scientific knowledge if it's presented in the right way, and as you say, if it's ubiquitous enough. And I guess maybe we need to sort of be develop a farm team, so to speak, or be fostering the next generation of science educators, not in a way that just appeals to college-educated elite, but in a way that anyone can relate to and viscerally grasp, even if it's just in kind of a basic and introductory way.
I think that's absolutely true. People relate to stories. People relate to personalities more than they relate to research papers. And I think letting people feel seen, I think, is important. Conspiracy theories don't just work as ideas, they work as communities. People get very into their theory or theories of choice, and it becomes an identity almost for them. And so I think there must be some way of leveraging that in the favor of facts. Having, say, YouTubers who make those personal connections with people and who foster people's sense of responsibility to uphold facts, people's pride in that, and their personal interest in science, I think could be very promising.
Do you think that there is anything about the structure of social media and the internet as it exists today that we can do, any overall parameters that we could adjust either through regulation or incentives or what have you, that would make the spread of flat earth thought, QAnon thought, other conspiracy theories that are damaging to us, at least less viral, if it's not something that we can get rid of entirely? And I really wouldn't expect it to if it's been around for basically as long as humanity.
Yes, I think there is, and I'm glad you set those parameters, because a lot of people ask how we can remove conspiracy theories permanently, and the fact is that you simply can't. It's something we're all a little bit prone to.
Yeah.
But I mentioned that YouTube's algorithm was very good for flat earth videos, and it was kind of a vicious cycle because those videos were so curiosity-provoking. They started scoring better in YouTube's recommendations. So the videos would then pop up in the feeds of people who weren't even looking for flat earth videos, who might have been looking at videos about astronomy, as was the case of somebody I was interviewing. And that particular algorithmic quirk ran for 5 years at YouTube, from around 2014 to 2019, when they got so much backlash because so many people were documenting, yes, conspiracy videos in general, but specifically how well flat earth videos performed, that YouTube said, okay, we're changing it. And now it is, in fact, quite hard to accidentally stumble upon a flat earth video. You can do it. But when I talk to flat earth video creators now, they say, yeah, we took a hit. And so it's, when we get into questions of removing certain content from online, I think that becomes a bit thornier, and there are a lot more ethical and, frankly, business questions to consider there. But I think we know at this point that social media algorithms have artificially promoted misinformation. They've given misinformation a leg up over real information. And when a company can recognize that and go in and make the fix like YouTube did, I think that is a very promising step, at least.
Yeah, and I you kind of just briefly alluded to it, but it is often in contradiction with the basic motivation of a company like YouTube or Facebook to promote interaction, which is something that it makes money off of. If people really glom onto something, then they're able to sell more advertisements on it, and they ultimately end up making more money as a result. So how do we counter those instances, except for the very top few worst negatively impacting conspiracy theories that people are likely to work up a backlash around? It seems like a kind of difficult thing to do given our current system.
It's tremendously challenging. We've seen that sometimes these companies respond to social and business pressure, as was the case with YouTube in 2019, but it's not always so clear-cut. Over the past month or so, I've been watching the controversy over Joe Rogan on Spotify, and there was tremendous social pressure for Spotify to kick him off. They were losing some prominent artists like Neil Young, who said he was going to pull his music from Spotify, and I think he actually did. But these companies are always making business decisions. Is it worthwhile for them to lose what I think is their flagship podcast, or to lose the Neil Young back catalog. And I'm sure they have very hard numbers on exactly what those cost benefits are. So often you see them making compromises. They went through the Rogan back catalog and they removed 70-something episodes that I believe had slurs in them. That's not likely to satisfy many people, to be honest. It's not going to satisfy the Rogan fans or the people who have a more holistic disagreement with him. But we see brands walking these lines, trying to maintain just enough good graces in the social eye and also, just watching their bottom line.
Yeah. And it's difficult, too, because even if in a situation like that you were able to get Joe Rogan off the air, which might or might not be a thing to do. And I shouldn't say off the air because it is just a podcast. Two different worlds. It's hard to distinguish sometimes. But there would be 1,000 other people to take up the same, banner, really. And there would be, people who join it because of a reaction, because they didn't like the idea that they thought that he was being censored. So it's a complicated project to take on. It really is. And of course, again, at heart, it's something that we're all to a certain degree inclined to. I think we just have to work to mitigate the worst aspects of it. And when it comes to QAnon, which has had such a deleterious impact on our politics in the United States and around the world. And flat earthers are one thing, but behind that mentality is a psychology that can lead to far more dangerous things than just believing we're a giant dish surrounded by walls of ice or something like that. So we've been speaking with Kelly Weill, and the book that we've been talking about is Off the Edge, Flat Earthers, Conspiracy Culture, and Why People Will Believe Anything. Where can they find out more information about that and what you write for the Daily Beast, Kelly?
I typically cover extremism and misinformation at the Daily Beast. It's a very lively beat at the moment. And you can find that work and more work about my book and upcoming events. I put them all on my Twitter account, which is just my name. It's Kelly Weill. And
that's Weill. Thank you so much. Right. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me.
My, oh my. Those flat earther conspiracy theorists are a strange bunch. But it is, it's something that's been with us for a long time. And speaking of delusional thinking, apparently everything's fine in the U.S. Senate. Bills are passing. Great things are happening. I saw this story earlier this week, the title of which is Schumer's Senate Shocker. Bills are passing. Seriously. In Politico, it's as if the authors are trying to convince themselves of the veracity of what they are asserting. And I think for most critically thinking people, it's clearly not the case. It's the Capitol's election year surprise. The 50-50 Senate is actually working. Now look, this is a left-leaning show. I'm probably more than a liberal. I'm a leftist, really. But across the political spectrum, does anybody really think that the U.S. Senate has done very many productive things in this session? Anybody? Bueller? Please. Hey, I know sure, infrastructure at the behest of big business, but not too much. There's a lot of stuff that has not gotten done or that's been severely compromised on. But not according to Politico. after high-profile partisan failures. Oh, there have been failures, but on President Joe Biden's signature domestic policy bill, Build Back Better, and on weakening the filibuster, that old thing, the chamber's racked up a series of bipartisan accomplishments lately, some of which had eluded Congress for years. And so the number one thing that they did, are you ready for this? The very first thing they mentioned in this article? They passed an anti-lynching law. That's right. In 2022, the year of our Lord, they passed an anti-lynching law. Something that I think they first tried to do in the 1890s, for God's sake. That the House has passed any number of times. They finally did it. That's a big thing. They're 130 years late to the party. But, better late than never, U.S. Senate, I guess. And they gave $14 billion for Ukraine. So, that's a nice thing for the military-industrial complex. And hey, it probably completely justified. Not that I'm opposed to that, but you got to keep in mind that if it involves giving money to the military-industrial complex, that's a thing that's likely to pass. They passed the military budget also, which has been increased. So you got to understand what these things are. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is hoping to add a couple more bipartisan wins soon on expanding semiconductor manufacturing as a part of a China competitiveness measure. Well, if you can use it to stoke xenophobia, then that's helpful too. Schumer is feeling good enough to brag a little about how much meaningful legislation has cleared the chamber's 60-vote threshold in the last 5 weeks. Oh, my God. This is like, obviously, these reporters were far too critical in the past of Chuck Schumer, and they're kissing up. Clearly kissing up. The honeymoon may not last long. Schumer isn't yet giving up on passing another party-line social spending bill after Senator Joe Manchin spurned Biden's previous offer in December. Oh, he isn't giving up. Schumer isn't giving up on pushing the GOP. He said there will absolutely be an election year debate on legislation that Republicans broadly oppose. Remember when after that, when all the Build Back Better stuff failed, and then they went and they said, they couldn't pass the filibuster reform, and they said, well, at least we're going to pass we're going to make a big fight on voting rights. They knew they were going to lose it. Manchin said that he was going to oppose it, and Schumer went out there and he made a big fight over it anyway, knowing he was going to lose for no good reason. I guess he's showing that he's trying to get an A for effort or something like that. It's about results, man. Got to figure something out. It ain't working right now. Because, you've got anti-lynching legislation and a couple of little piddling things here and there. But you didn't raise the corporate tax rate to 28%, which you said you were going to do. You didn't make colleges and universities, public ones, tuition-free for families who make less than $25 like you said you were going to do. You haven't established an offshoring tax penalty like you said you were going to do. You haven't introduced a constitutional amendment to eliminate private dollars from federal elections like you said you were going to do. You haven't offered a public option health insurance plan like Medicare like you said you were going to do. You haven't increased the federal minimum wage. You haven't updated the Voting Rights Act. And you haven't repealed the law barring Medicare from just negotiating lower drug prices. So, if you want to talk about fringe delusional thinking, Politico this week has got it. If you want some, Politico has some for you. Okay. I'm going to go back to watching the news, as you may be doing, about Ukraine, and hoping that there's something positive that's going to come out of it. I truly hope so. I hope that Russia is stopped. I hope that the people of Ukraine remain strong. And until next time, I'm Beowulf Rockland, and this is Facepalm America. Thank you for being here.
Hey there, fellow working class heroes. I'm Rick Smith, host of The Rick Smith Show. Are you tired of the corporate-controlled media ignoring the needs of we the people? You know, the people who actually do the work? Are you tired of the platitudes that they throw at us? Remember when they called us patriotic, frontline heroes, essential, only to find out that they've lined their pockets with the fruits of our sacrifice and labor? Had enough? It's time to come together, organize, and unite. Join us at The Rick Smith Show daily by downloading the podcast each and every day. Subscribe so you never miss a minute. The Rick Smith Show podcast is found wherever you get your podcasts, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, and beyond. Go to thericksmithshow.com for more information on how you can get the podcast each and every day. The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.